Hello, everybody. Welcome back to ShefF1. We are live for our preview and predictions of this weekend's Las Vegas Grand Prix. I'm, of course, joined by Amy. Amy, how are you feeling ahead of a crucial start to the final triple header of the season? How are you feeling ahead of a crucial weekend?
I'm very excited actually. I mean, Las Vegas is a Grand Prix that when it was introduced in 2023, I remember we were still doing videos then and we really was not looking forward to it. But it ended up being a great race the last 2 years that I've thoroughly enjoyed. It was almost like the cars came closer to Max in them races, especially the Ferraris, and Mercedes obviously last year, with George Russell winning. Um, so pretty close. But no, it's always been a tight field in Las Vegas, so I'm excited for what that has in store for us this weekend, and also the extra context of the championship. Can Verstappen, I mean, it's a track where McLaren have not been successful around the last 2 years. So can Verstappen be able to get a little more points over the two contenders and potentially get more in the story for the last two races of the season? I mean, it definitely be interesting. I hope not. For my luck, the we are filming on obviously just before qualifying. Was able to have the privilege of watching practice one and two. And don't get me wrong, with practice one, both McLarens looked down there. I was thinking, oh, it's it's gone before it's even started. Lando couldn't make a corner twice in a row, the exact same corner, and I was thinking, oh, okay, let's just admit defeat to this championship, whatever. Max is gonna win. But practice two, he then goes and tops the timesheet. So, I think they understand that they're here for pole and they're gonna be in the party. But I think there'll be other contenders in there, including Max Verstappen. I think Charles Leclerc. I think Lewis Hamilton. And I even think Yuki Tsunoda. But maybe we'll
Ooh.
get into that going into our predictions. But I'm excited for Las Vegas. It's the bright lights. It's the party vibes of the circuit. And a little bit extra because it's in America, and it's one I enjoy. So I'm not looking forward to the early starts, but I am looking forward to the actual race. Just wish it went at 4 a.m.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you said, when we looked back at our preview in 2023, I think it was, we were all very much like, yeah, this is. I think our predictions at the start of that season, we thought this was going to be like Miami, basically.
Hmm.
But yeah, as you said, it's been really, really exciting. I think both races have been really good. There's been shocks. I think, obviously, first couple of years, you'd say Pierre Gasly in qualifying. I think it was P4 in the first year, P3 last year. Williams have been up there both years. Esteban Ocon, I remember finishing P4 in 2023 as well. So yeah, there's definitely been some exciting races, and yeah, I'm really excited. I think that there could definitely be some curveballs this weekend. And as you said, with McLaren having struggled their past couple of years with graining, and there was some speculation and actually some talk in FP1 about that maybe popping up again. This could be maybe the weekend Max needs to get himself back in the fight, if that fight is even actually a thing anymore. But yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of talking points to go into. But I think we'll get straight on into our predictions. And there's no sprint this weekend. There's only one left in Qatar next weekend. So we're going to go straight into our poll prediction. Prediction. Yep, that makes sense. Amy, I have no idea who you've put. So tell me, who is going to be on pole in the early
Uh,
hours of Saturday morning?
yeah, it's really weird. It's like the day before. But I have gone for a driver who I could just trust to put it on pole. They, in my opinion, are the fastest driver over a one lap speed. I think this car runs well around the circuit over a one lap speed. Let me emphasize that. Um, and that is why I've gone for Charles Leclerc. I think he's been fast around here the last 2 years. I remember he was able to get back in the fight for P2 in the driver's standings, which at the time to be able to finish above another Red Bull in Checo Perez was insane, and he got a good bonus for that, I remember. And yeah, I just fancy his chances round here if we top the timesheets in P1, and I do think there'll be plenty of contenders amongst him. But I think he's a driver who's great amongst street circuits, and ultimately will put the lap together to secure pole position in a Ferrari.
Wow. Well, I've also gone for Charles Leclerc. I definitely
Oh.
agree. I think that Ferrari are going to be really strong this weekend. They have been basically the only team. Well, I think I saw that they're the only side that have had a podium in both of the races in 2023 and 2024. And I think that Charles Leclerc, as you said, you can just trust him to put it on pole. And I haven't trusted him in recent weeks when it comes to our predictions. I have consistently predicted him to be a flop, and it never works out. So I'm actually going to back him this time, and I think that Charles Leclerc. I think it's between him and potentially the Mercedes. I'd say for that pole position. They've looked like the two strongest sides, maybe in the practice sessions, but didn't really get that much representative running in either of them. But if you look at the past couple of years and what the characteristics of the track suit, I'd say it's Mercedes and Ferrari. And then, as you said, I think Leclerc is definitely up there for the fastest one lap pace. I think it could be a good battle between him and George, but we'll get onto that with one of my other predictions. But yeah, I'm going to go for Charles Leclerc as well. But just because he's on pole position doesn't necessarily mean he's our star of qualifying. So Amy, who have you gone for to be your star of qualifying?
This one may seem slightly controversial. I'm not cheating here. This is for genuine reasons, right? I think Lando Norris I think the way the McLaren is around this track, I think anything that is second for him is still a great result. And obviously the chance he can go and put it on pole. I do believe that as well. But I think the fact that he's had really bad races here. I mean, he started sixth last year and didn't go anywhere from that position. He finished sixth. The year before, he had a really bad incident, and crashed. And yeah, I just think it's not a track that I associate with him with. And I hope that this weekend they've not obviously not made a car that actually fits this track, but the way it has the same characteristics to like Montreal and how bad we knew they did there, and obviously without his mistake as well, they just didn't move in that race. I think if he's able to have the speed to fight to put it on pole and also potentially get in second place and be able to fight for a win from there, especially with, Ferrari and their Lyco issues, he could be well in contention for a race win here. I think being able to put it on the front of the grid for him, I think that would be a great result, and I would take that all day long. So yeah, Lando Norris is actually my star of quality, but not for reasons that I think he's going to finish on pole. If he finishes second in qualifying, I think that's still a great result for him.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think as long as he's not second to Oscar Piastri, and even then, he could finish second, obviously, in every session for the rest of the season,
Yeah.
and he'd still win the championship. So that's still, would make him the star of the year in that sense. But yeah, I definitely think that if he can get up there in that McLaren that looks like it's going to struggle this weekend, then I think you have to say that's a brilliant performance from him. Especially with some more pressure increasing on him with obviously the championship battle, and it is now, you'd say, completely in his hands. If he can continue to not really play into that, then I think that he you have to say would be a star qualifying. You said though it's not a track that you really associate with him. For my star qualifying, I have gone for someone you might associate, especially when it comes to qualifying for this track. I mentioned him earlier. I'm going to go for Pierre Gasly as my star qualifying. I think that Alpine seem to be competitive, especially if you look at the practice sessions. They seem to be somewhat okay, at least compared to how they have been in the rest of the season. I don't think he's going to quite match the P4 in 2023 or the P3 from last year. I just don't think the Alpine is anywhere near as good as it was, even if it comes to a track where obviously it's very different compared to other tracks. I still don't think Alpine are then just going to magically be able to jump from being the slowest car on the grid to be getting into the top 5 or whatever. But I do think he will be able to make Q3, and it's almost one of those things where we said it last time out, where it feels like if he has a sniff at the moment of any sort of points, then you actually get to see the true Pierre Gasly. I think that he'll definitely have that this weekend. He's gone really strong there in the past. And yeah, Alpine just seem to weirdly, despite having the worst engine on the grid, and that should hamper them when it comes to the long straights you see in Vegas, somehow they seem to manage to get the most out of this track. So I think that, yeah, Pierre for me is going to continue his one race of good form. It's going to make it two races of good form, and he's going to be my star of qualifying. But we'll move on to a more somber note now with our flop of qualifying. I'm going to kick this off with my flop of qualifying. And I said that I think it's going to be between Mercedes and Ferrari for pole position. I think they're going to be the two quickest cars over one lap. So I think that this driver, by missing out potentially on a top 5 finish, is going to be my flop of qualifying. I'm going to go for last year's winner, George Russell, as my flop of qualifying. I think this would be a bit of a shock if he was to have a big stinker, but I think with the form of Kimi Antonelli and how he's turned around the last couple of weekends, especially in Brazil, he was just the quicker driver over George. I think that Kimi's going to have another great weekend. I think he's going to build that confidence, and I think that George might struggle. Now, there's not much for me to base this on other than just sort of, I feel like it might happen. I feel like maybe George might go out there to try and prove a point a little bit and maybe push a little bit too hard potentially, whereas Kimi will just have that confidence to just go, you know what, I can get the most out of this car. And Kimi obviously seems okay in practice so far. So yeah, I think that Kimi Antonelli is going to out-qualify George Russell, and that in itself makes him a bit of a flop, but I also think that he might get it. Little things maybe get to his head a little bit this weekend. And I think that, yeah, maybe finishing outside the top 5 for me is going to make George Russell my flop. But what about you, Amy? Who have you gone for your flop of qualifying?
Well, the reasoning behind my flop quality is similar to yours. I believe this driver's going to not qualify above his teammate, and that would be Oscar Piastri. And I believe that is because I'm maybe trying to manifest the storyline here. But I think with Oscar Piastri, we've seen constantly from Monza, ever since Monza, that he is just not been in the same headspace he was at the beginning of the year. Mentally wise, he's struggling at the minute, and I don't think that's going to stop here in Las Vegas. I don't think it's a track that is extremely, I guess, romantic with McLaren car. I think obviously both drivers have had the same amount of experience around the circuit, because obviously it was introduced in 2023 and Oscar started his career at McLaren in 2023. So there's no real advantage for either or driver, but I think we've seen in practice, and I've always said I'm not going to take practice into consideration, but it's going to actually give evidence to my point here of, yes, Lando and Oscar both struggled in practice 1, but in practice 2, Lando was top in the timesheets with a lot less laps than everyone else, so he still had less time to be able to put in fast laps, yet Oscar Piastri was still nowhere near him. I think we could see that happening in qualifying, and yeah, I think I don't know, I just could see him coming alive with the car, even though it is not the best. I think there's been a lot of talk that obviously, and proven, that McLaren can get pole the last few races. Yet Oscar Piastri's been not close to it. I've just not seen these qualifying performances that he was putting in at the beginning of the year. And I said this, I remember even, I think it was our Zandvoort review. Obviously, the worst thing ever just happened to Lando Norris and became 34 points behind his teammate. And I still back the fact that the second half of the season is where Norris is going to dominate Piastri and that he has better tracks. And I think this is just another track where I don't think Norris is particularly great around here, but I think he'll be better than Piastri, and yeah, I hope he proves that. The one thing I do have to say though with the practice is they have been trying out different wings, so maybe that's something to do with it, and Oscar's gonna actually end up taking the same wing as Lando, and that's why he's a lot faster. But yeah, Piastri, he's just someone who, he's not really you're going to back as your favourite at the minute to win or to get pole position. So I'm just going to go with that trend. And I'm sorry, Oscar, but I hope it happens.
Yeah, well, I hope for the championship's sake that Lando has a stinker and Max and Oscar up there. Because
Yeah.
for me, I think I've said it on our last podcast that I do feel like the championship is almost done at this point, and I definitely think it could be finished by the end of this weekend. But maybe we'll talk about that later. But anyway, we'll move on to the Sunday now, or the early Sunday morning, or Saturday as it is in Vegas, and we're gonna predict our podium. So, Amy, who is going to be your 1, 2, 3 come the checkered flag on Sunday morning?
So in third position, I have got Lando Norris. I believe the car is going to be quick enough to get a podium, but it isn't going to be the quickest car this weekend. I think I think he'll start at the front of the grid, but ultimately will not have enough pace in it to overtake, and potentially could lose spaces to the cars behind him that clearly look a bit stronger hit in previous years. But I still think that's a pretty good result to get third, because I have not got his teammate Oscar Piastri on my podium. But in fact, I've got in second place, I've gone for Charles Leclerc, my pole sitter. I think I kind of mentioned it before, but with Ferrari, I think they are strong around this track, and they've proven that in previous seasons. I don't know particularly what it is, because I don't think they were particularly strong in Montreal. But I think they will probably be one of the most dominant teams around the circuit this weekend. One thing I think that'll let them down with the win, because obviously I have them in pole position, will be like the Leica. They've really struggled with that, and especially with Las Vegas, we've seen it already in practice, that amount of sparks flying off from beneath the cars, running low downforce. I just could see that being his downfall. But with Charles Leclerc, when he's in that car, he controls it really well, and hopefully bounces back from Brazil. Obviously, a mistake he never made, and he just. If he says to his engineers, I just can see this happening, like, shut up, I'm driving, I've got this. Especially when Max is going to be right behind him and overtake him, because I've gone for Max Verstappen in first position. I believe that the Red Bull will be the quickest car around the circuit. I don't think that's been proven though in practice, so that's why I'm not going with my practice position. With practice as my examples for this prediction video. So that's why I just think Max, he's won he's won the championship in Vegas.
Yeah.
One year, was it in 2023?
Yeah. Was it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it was last year. Yeah, it was last year. Obviously had that amazing race in Brazil, and then obviously finished on the podium to be able to win the championship in Vegas the race after. So yeah, I think it's a good track for him. He enjoys it there, clearly. Great memories. And yeah, I just think it'll be the quickest car. And he's got that extra bit of fight in him because he's got nothing to lose. And yeah, I could see him potentially recharging his hopes in this championship, and especially for P2 if Oscar Piastri is nowhere near that podium, like I have predicted. So yeah, should be interesting. But I believe Max Verstappen first, Charles Leclerc second, and Lando Norris in third.
I've gone for a somewhat similar podium to you, but I haven't predicted either of the McLaren boys to be on the podium this weekend. I do think they'll still be up there. I don't think they're going to completely flop it, like, outside the top 10 or anything like that. I think maybe a P5, P6 potentially sort of finishing range for them. And I don't think they should be too disappointed with that. Well, obviously Oscar should be pretty disappointed by that, but I think Lando, I'm sure that'd be fine for him. So P3, I have gone for Kimi Antonelli. I think that Mercedes, as I said, are going to be up there. I think they're going to be really quick this weekend. And I think that Kimi, as I said, I think it's going to continue his great form. 2 podiums in 2 races, I think it's going to be for him. And I think, yeah, just he's going to be continuing to end the season in a really strong vein of form. I think he's going to finish ahead of Russell. I don't have Russell on the podium. But yeah, I'm going to go for Kimi Antonelli in P3. But ahead of him, I've gone for 2 different teams. I've gone for Red Bull and Ferrari, just like yourself. However, I've gone for Max Verstappen P2 and Charles Leclerc P1. I think that Max Verstappen, I think that I actually don't think Red Bull are going to be the quickest car this weekend. Obviously, they've been quick around there in the past, but last year they weren't super quick. I think the Mercedes and Ferrari were quicker than them last year around Vegas. And I think that that's maybe the only really thing I'm reading into. Obviously, practice session, I've literally no idea. But yeah, I think that still Max is going to be able to get the most out of the car this weekend. I think that he knows essentially. I think he'll still believe a little bit in his championship hopes. I don't think anyone else does, but I think that he will still believe a little bit. He has to have an amazing result this weekend to keep himself alive. I think he's just going to be viewing it as if he can still be in the championship like hunt going into Abu Dhabi, even if he's 24 points behind. I think obviously he would take that at this point, and I think that that'll be his goal. And I think that P2 finish, obviously, depending on when the McLaren's finish, that keeps him somewhat in the fight. So I think that's, and I just think that Red Bull will be quick, but not quite quick enough to catch the pulses of Charles Leclerc. I think that if he does have that clear air out in front, and I think that if he can get a good start, I think he'll lead by example. And I think we'll see a race from Charles Leclerc that we haven't seen, I feel like, for a long time, where he's been comfortable out front. I actually can't remember the last time we saw Charles Leclerc in what felt like he had the quickest car and he just led the race to a comfortable victory, the sort of victory we've seen so regularly from Lando and from Max and from Oscar recently. I just don't feel like we've seen that from Charles, and that is just because of the car he's had. But I think that definitely this weekend, I think that if he can get that confidence from qualifying and then have that clear air in the race, and Ferrari don't do anything silly, I think he can have a comfortable race and sort of put his name back out there in a sense to just prove, look, if I had the quickest car, if I do have it next year or whenever, I am still that driver that can lead from start to finishing. I can control a race and I am good enough to do that. Not that I don't think anyone doubts that, apart from maybe John Elkann, but yeah, I think that he'll do that. And actually, I also think, obviously, speaking of John Elkann, obviously his comments last week, I do feel like both drivers are going to be trying to, just stick a needle in there and make a little bit of a difference and just, maybe shut him up a little bit. So I hope that Lewis is up there, but I just can't trust him. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was up on the podium this weekend, especially if the Ferrari are that quick, because he was super quick around there last year, obviously, for Mercedes. Arguably potentially should have won the race, but yeah, I just can't trust him. I wouldn't back him to put him in predictions anymore, because even if he looks quick in practice sessions or whatever, and even if he was in great form, you wouldn't be surprised if he's out in Q1, and that's a weird thing to say about Lewis, but it just feels like that at the moment. So yeah, that's my podium. But just because there are podium sitters doesn't make him our driver of the day prediction. So, Amy, who do you think is going to get the driver of the day? Obviously, we do base it off the fan vote, but also it's just like whoever actually is the best driver. So, who do you think is going to be the best driver on the Sunday?
Well, I mentioned it slightly before. I think it's a name that you wouldn't regularly put in driver of the day this season, but that is Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, maybe I'm getting carried away. P1 again. I said I would do this, but I finishing third, he finished ahead of Max. But he just looks so comfortable in that car and around this track. And I think if he has that set up, going into qualifying and then going into the race, I think it's something starting to click with him. And obviously he's fighting for his seat in F1 as well at the end of the day. So I think a great result and one worthy of driver of the day for Yuki Tsunoda would be, I think I could see him finishing as high as fourth, just missing out on some podium spots. I think, like I said, I do think the Red Bull will be fast around here this weekend, and in a car where Yuki looks happy in, and yeah, it's about time. I mean, it's only took them the whole season, but I'm excited for Yuki Tsunoda. Good race, and could he be a driver who is able to get in the mix with the top teams and maybe affect some things with Max's championship contenders, like the two McLarens and maybe intervene, get them going slow behind Yuki getting on the defense. I could actually see that happening this weekend, and yeah, I just think it'll be a good weekend for Yuki, and I hope so because it's been a while coming. Um, Even though he's had some decent races, I just would like one where it's a particular standout performance and one where you're only as good as your last race. Well, hopefully it's one to be remembered by for the next two, and hopefully goes into the decision Red Bull are going to make, probably by Abu Dhabi, and they'll take it into consideration. So yeah,
Yeah.
Yuki Tsunoda.
No, I really, really hope so. And he really needs it. I think he's obviously under a lot of pressure. And as you said, he's had some decent races recently, but it's like it's decent in comparison to what that second Red Bull seat has been this year.
Hmm.
He hasn't had a result where you actually go, oh yeah, that's where that Red Bull car is. Even when he's
Yeah.
finishing P7, it's like, oh yeah, that's decent for Sonoda. It's like
Hmm.
that shouldn't be good enough. That is not good enough for that second Red Bull seat. Um, so I think I really hope he has a real standout performance this weekend, and can put his name back up there, because it feels like Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar are both doing all they need to do to keep their seat in F1 at the moment, and it would feel incredibly harsh to kick either of them out, especially, obviously, I don't think Isaac's going anywhere, but especially Liam at the moment. I don't think there's any reason why Yuki Tsunoda at the moment, if you base it off of form, should have that second V-carb seat if it is Isaac that gets promoted to Red Bull next year. He should. There's not really any reason why you would say, well, Yuki Tsunoda merits it on his performances this year. Obviously, there's a lot more that comes into it, but he's making it a very difficult decision, and Yuki needs to make that decision a lot easier by putting in a good performance. So fingers crossed for him, but we'll see about that one. I've gone for someone I think I predicted as a driver of the day a couple of weeks ago, and it was a terrible prediction, but I'm backing him once again. I'm going to go for Franco Colapinto. Even as I'm saying that, I'm like, what am I doing? But I still think, and we said this before, I think he's been okay. His pace recently has been okay. He wasn't very good in Brazil, but I think that maybe he'll be able to learn from Pierre a little bit about, as we said, about when there is this chance of points, being able to capitalise on that occasion. We know he has the ability to do that. We saw that at Williams last year. And I think that Alpine, as I said, I think they will be competitive. I think they and Williams will be best of the rest when it comes to midfield this weekend. I think that just weirdly they have cars that suit this track. And I think that Franco, he needs a good performance. And I think that he potentially will get his first points of the year. I don't think it'll be points. I think if it is going to be points, it'll be a point. But even still, if he manages to get a point in that Alpine, that is a brilliant performance, and I think he would be a very well deserved driver of the day. And I think if he does somehow get a point, I think he will actually get the actual driver of the day, even if PS finishes P8 or whatever, just because we know how many fans he's got, we know how passionate his fans are. I think they'll get some voting in, and I think that Franco Colapinto for driver of the day, I think, could be potentially up there. But once again, we'll go on to a more somber note. We'll go on to our flop of the race, and I'll kick this off with your flop of qualifying is my flop of the race. I've gone for Oscar Piastri. Now, as I've said this, I'm not quite sure I believe it, because, I have been a very strong backer of Oscar all throughout, basically. But I just think this is the weekend where the championship will be over. And I don't think it can't mathematically be over because of the sprint race in Qatar. But I think that, look, if he doesn't close the gap, I think it's over. But I think that the gap is going to grow, and I think it's going to grow to maybe by 10 points or so. I think that Lando's, as you said, I think he's going to have a really decent weekend, even if the McLaren isn't up there. And I think for Oscar, he knows he has to get a really, really strong points finish. He can't just, even if he finishes ahead of Norris and he finishes P7 and Norris is P8 or whatever, that's not good enough. That isn't good enough at this point of the season for him. He has to have a really, really strong result. And he's going to have to push like hell. And we saw it in Brazil a little bit, where it felt like with that move into turn one, it felt like he was like, I actually have to get my elbows out now. I have to go for moves that maybe I wouldn't go for if I was a championship leader. I can't take those risks. And I think that, yes, it could turn out to give him some great moves and some great overtakes. But equally, there's a reason they're risky moves, and I think that we could see Oscar potentially get some damage on his car by making some sort of massive lunge onto someone who's actually got a quicker car or something like that. Or as he said, maybe someone like Yuki Tsunoda, he gets frustrated behind, makes a lunge that he shouldn't do. And I think that he's going to be the flop. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets another penalty, his frustrations show. I think it's just going to be a bad race overall for him. And I think that it's going to be the end of his championship fight. So yeah, I think he's going to be my flop of the race. I'm sure that was something you'd love to happen, but who is your flop of the race?
Oh yeah, it's definitely interesting, Seb. Definitely interested. But I have gone for someone different, and also I have gone for someone going the polar opposite as what I've predicted for their teammate, and that would be Lewis Hamilton. There's a part of me where I'm like, the Ferrari's going to be quick, and this is his chance to get his first podium. But then there's a part of me, and also, proving John Elkann wrong. It's been very noisy Ferrari in the media with both drivers, particularly Lewis Hamilton, since Brazil. So it is at the time to be able to prove that. I just don't see him getting on the podium, and yeah, there's not much to that, but I think a contributing factor for Lewis as well is luck. He's had a lot of bad luck when he has been strong in races. We've seen in Singapore when the brakes went. Similarly to what was the race after Singapore? Mexico, was it?
I think so.
No.
Was it?
Yeah. Well, the race after Singapore. I can't think that. The race after Singapore.
Mexico, he got penalties, didn't he? So
yes, Mexico. Obviously, the luck. I knew what I was talking about. Luck just not going his way. Don't get me wrong. Maybe he was right in those penalties, but I think there's other drivers who also deservingly should have had penalties, and it was unfair decisions made there. So I think maybe it's not a personal error that makes him flop of the day, but I think if I predicted his teammate to be on pole position and then finishing second in the race, and Lewis not being near that, as Lewis Hamilton as well, I think it'd be a bit of a flop. And yeah, I just can't see him finishing on the podium.
Yeah, I hope that's not the case. I would love to see his first Ferrari podium at Vegas, but sadly, I do think I agree with that. But I think now we've got an interesting prediction. We've got our best team. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of Mercedes or Ferrari. Well, by me, I've been the one saying that. But obviously, Alpine, Williams, Red Bull, as you said, could be quickest. Who are you actually going to go for your best team? Is it going to be Red Bull or is it going to be someone else?
Well, you've spoiled it there for me, Seb. If I'm putting a driver, one of their drivers to win the race and one of them to get driver of the day, then I've got to go for Red Bull. And yeah, I just think it's weird putting them. I never put them in best team because, like I said, we would never predict them as best team back in the day because we thought it'd be a boring prediction. But now I think that'd be pretty exciting. I think if both drivers are up there fighting for a podium, which is what I believe will happen, I think they can be. Don't get me wrong, Max Verstappen finished 5th last year. So I do think it's not particularly, if we're using that as our evidence, a strong statement that I'm predicting. But the year before, obviously won there in his Elvis suit, and I could see something similar happening this year, especially with that extra fight coming from inside him to go on and win this race. And I do think Ferrari and Mercedes will be particularly fast, but I think Max Verstappen is faster. The devil works hard, but Max Verstappen works harder. And Yuki Tsunoda, I predicted a great race from him, getting quite high points, 4th is my prediction if I had to give him a position. So I can't not go for Red Bull this weekend, and that is why I've gone for Red Bull.
Definitely makes sense. And I've gone for a bit of a random one. I've not really mentioned them at all so far, but I've gone for Williams as my best team. I think they seem, as I said, I think them and Alpine are going to be the best of the rest when it comes to midfield. but I kind of trust Williams drivers a bit more when it comes to the main race. I think, I'm obviously a big Pierre fan, and I think that he is obviously my predicted star qualifying. But if you look at his races at Vegas, they've been absolutely terrible. Year one, he started P4, and I think he finished P11 potentially, maybe even lower than that. He got massive graining on his tyres, and he just couldn't quite handle that. And then last year, he went too quickly that his engine blew up. So I don't quite trust Alpine to actually be strong in a race. I think they can do well around one lap, but obviously I also predicted Colbinson to maybe get a point. But I think that when it comes to the rest of those spots in the top 10, I do think that Williams will be the two that take it. I think that they'll be strong in qualifying, and I think they'll be strong in the race. I think, obviously, remember back, I think Logan Sargent qualified P7 in Vegas. Logan Sargent qualified P7. So I do think that Williams, with Alex Albon, who I think qualified P6 that same year, and Carlos Sainz as their driver partnership, I think they're going to be incredibly strong. I think it's going to be a double points finish for Williams. And I think that even though they are almost the only team with absolutely nothing to play for in the championship, they are going to finish P5. That's it. There's no one's going to catch them for P5. They're not going to catch, who is it in P4? What is it? Ferrari in P4. They're obviously not going to catch Ferrari in P4, and they're not going to get caught by Aston Martin. I think it is in P6. So there's not really anything on the line for them, so it wouldn't make them the best team in that case. I think that if you're going to go from that aspect, it is a really crucial weekend in the battle for P2. I think that this is it seems like it's going to be one of those P2, P3, P4 teams that are going to be quickest this weekend with McLaren struggle. So it is massive in that fight. So I do think whichever team comes out on top is probably going to be the best team, which contradicts my prediction. But anyway, I'm still going to go for Williams. As I said, I think they're going to be a strong round there. But we move on to our favourite prediction to make, and that is our shock prediction. So, Amy, what is going to be the shock of Vegas this weekend?
So, I predicted with my flop of the race with Lewis Hamilton that he is not going to be anywhere near his teammate. And I just can't see, even though I predicted him to get pole and on the podium, he's not going to be near that. And I don't think that's anything particularly about his own personal drive, and I think luck won't be on his side. But for shock prediction, I believe luck will be on his side. And I've gone for Lewis Hamilton first podium with Ferrari at Las Vegas. And that is because I do think Ferrari will be fast. There's not 1 ounce in me that doesn't believe Lewis Hamilton can be fast in that car or keep up with Charles Leclerc. I believe he can. So if Charles Leclerc's finishing on the podium, why can't Lewis Hamilton? Why can't he go on and win it, Seb? But I am going to just say a podium, and I think that's quite believable. It's a race where it's a prediction I've done before. With him getting his first podium, hasn't come true. Did it in Monza, but I don't think I actually believed it. I think it was like the magic of Monza that made me want to believe it. But this, I could actually see it happening because I do believe Ferrari will be fast. And like I said, it's still Lewis Hamilton at the end of the day. And if you give him a fast car, why wouldn't he be on the podium? So yeah, Lewis Hamilton on the podium.
Fingers crossed. I've gone for a bit more of a boring prediction. I've just gone for a double Alpine Q3. And as I'm saying, I'm thinking, I feel like we used to go for more exciting things. I feel like we used to go for actual shocking things. Like, I don't know, like some gambling story came out about one of the drivers in Vegas. I want to make predictions like that again, but no, I've gone for just a double Alpine Q3, which I think would be shocking. I don't think Franco Colbin's has actually made it to Q3 yet this year. And thus, I don't think Alpine have actually had a single double Q3 appearance. Despite Pierre making it to Q3 8 times, which is more than he got there last year when he finished P10 in the driver standings, which is weird to think. But I think, as I said, they're going to be quick. I think that I trust them more in qualifying than the race. I think that maybe, even though I'm predicting that Williams will finish both drivers in the points, I think that I could see that maybe Franco, we know at times last year had a quicker pace than Albon. And I think that Pierre, I think that he could finish high up there in qualifying and stuff. So I think that, I think that they'll be the strongest team in the midfield when it comes to qualifying. Not necessarily the race, but I do think that I'm going to predict them as a double Alpine Q3. Would it be that shocking? Yeah, but would anyone care? No, I don't think so. But yeah, that is my prediction. That's both of our predictions for this Las Vegas Grand Prix. Have you got any final thoughts, Amy, going into this weekend?
No, it is just it is a big race, and I think the fact that for the championship, if Lando does great, if he goes on and wins it with the form he's currently in, well, not that he can win it mathematically, but going into Qatar, it's completely in both of his hands. He just needs to grasp it. Yeah. Also, it could be a massive, flip up. I mean, it's still what is it? Oscar's 24 points behind Lando. Lando has a mechanical failure, a DNF, and Oscar's on equal points with him if he goes and wins it himself. I think Max Verstappen could get himself back in here because there's so much. I think there'll be so much contention between all the 4 top teams. I think they'll all be going for this pole and win. I think we'll have a very exciting qualifying to watch and worth getting up for the 3 a.m. start or staying up. But yeah, I think a lot of drivers could come in contention this weekend, whether that's splitting all the championship contenders, potentially, contact with them, because they're like the likes of George Russell, Charles Leclerc, they've got nothing to lose, and if they want to go for a race win, see you later, barge them out the way. But yeah, so I think it's just a massive weekend. Anything could happen, and I'm very excited. But I am ready to gamble my money on a Max Verstappen win. So.
And I'm ready to gamble on a double Alpine Q3. So yeah, very, very excited for this weekend, and hopefully, if everyone stays up, I hope it will be worth it. So yeah, thank you for joining me, Amy, for our predictions. I'm sure we'll be back on Monday for our review of the Grand Prix. But until then, keep dancing. I don't know why. Anyway, whatever. I don't know what I'm saying. Right, anyway, I'm not Bruce Forsyth. So yeah,
just keep dancing.
I'm gonna
keep driving.
So